All right. So as I said, we're going to go ahead and get started by watching this short video. You might see some familiar faces.
My name is Dan Hannikin, and I'm the Executive Director of Into Action.
My name is Patty. I'm a social worker with the City of St. Louis and a grandmother of 5 grandchildren.
My name is Fran Marion. I am a manager at Taco Bell here in Kansas City, Missouri. I am a mother of 2.
And I'm living with a felony record.
And I've been living with a criminal record.
Living with a record. I got my record trying to cash a stolen check. It was a $700 check to be exact.
I started using drugs when I was about 13 years old. I had to be able to feed my addiction, and I would shoplift to do that. And that sent me to prison for my first time in 1984.
I went to prison for the first time when I was 26 years old. I spent 3.5 years in prison for a car accident that I caused while I was drinking. I had no idea the challenges that I would face when I was released from prison that first time. Everything from housing to employment was impacted.
I've spent the past 20 years trying to get past my record. The people in my life most affected by my record are my children.
My wife.
My kids are doing a life sentence with me because it affects me keeping a roof over their head. I can meet every criteria for a job, but you see that felony, it's over with.
It's like carrying weight around my neck.
The weight, I'll probably carry this for the rest of my life. The first word that comes to mind is free.
Free. Relief. Relief from the constant anxiety of someone finding out about me. I would say to people who are hesitant about passing any legislation is that we're just like you.
I clock in like everybody else. I pay my bills like everybody else. Why can't I be entitled to that second chance?
Those of us that are convicted felons, we want to turn the page.
What society would get back past a clean slate is a law-abiding citizen, a voter, a person that can give back to society.
That's a win-win for everybody.
People have possibilities. I don't care who they are. Everybody has something to give. But you don't know that until you give them a chance.
We're not just a cell number. We're not just an inmate number. I am a mother. I am a manager. And I am a leader. You know, I stand up for what I believe in. And I believe in clean slate. I'm standing up for it. So I need y'all to stand with me too.
All right, so that was a couple people involved with the Clean Slate campaign. Dan, Patty, and Fran have all also spoken at various town hall events that we've done on Clean Slate in the last 1.5 years. I'm putting a link to this page on the Clean Slate website in the chat. So you can go ahead and find that on your own again later if you'd like to share that with anybody. So what is clean slate legislation? What do we mean when we say this? So there is a national organization called the Clean Slate Initiative that is partnering with us here in Missouri and with many other states to help us in passing clean slate legislation. And so these criteria come from their website in what needs to be present for it to officially be considered a clean slate legislation. So just simply making changes to the petition-based expungement process, even if they're necessary changes, even if they'll make it more accessible for people, that still is not clean slate. Clean slate has to include full automation of criminal records, automatic clearance upon eligibility. So as soon as somebody becomes eligible for record sealing, which in Missouri, when we talk about expungement, we are talking about record sealing rather than clearing. Clearing means that the record is erased. No one has access to that record. Here in Missouri, expungement means record sealing, which means that private background checks, employers, landlords, any of those type of people looking into a background check would not have access to that record, but courts and law enforcement, if somebody were to get a future charge, would still be able to see that record. It would not be totally erased, but it wouldn't be able to be pulled up on CaseNet by anybody. So automatic clearance, automatic sealing upon eligibility, inclusion of arrest records. So here we're talking about, someone had an arrest that did not result in a conviction, that still shows up on a background check. That can still bar somebody from getting employment or from getting housing, even if it didn't result in a conviction. So clean slate's gotta include even that low-hanging fruit of arrest records. It's got to include misdemeanor records. And then there's a strong recommendation that laws include eligibility for at least one felony. And that's what we are trying to pursue in Missouri. We want to see automated record sealing be available for anybody that's currently eligible for expungement. So that includes a number of felonies, nonviolent felonies, the majority of misdemeanors, and then all of those arrest records and like municipal infractions, things like that. Oh, didn't mean to click on that link, sorry. But if you want to see, this is the Clean Slate Initiative's website. They've got a lot of really good resources here. So feel free to explore their website. So since the Clean Slate Initiative was launched, there has been a number of states that have passed clean slate laws. 2.3 million people have had at least one conviction or non-conviction cleared. 7.3 million cases will be cleared with the laws that have been passed thus far, and 2 million people are set to receive full record clearance. So all of their records were eligible under their state's clean slate law. 10 states have passed laws that meet that criteria for clean slate legislation, including Oklahoma and Utah, Colorado. These are all states that passed clean slate legislation with a more conservative government, including at the executive branch, and they were able to get clean slate passed. So it's not just states like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware that have been able to do clean slate. It's red states or purple states as well. And we've got campaigns underway in a number of states, including Missouri, obviously, and also our neighbors in Illinois. New York has been trying for multiple years to pass clean slate. They've got a really robust campaign there. So here's just a map of the states. Dark blue has a current clean slate policy, and then the teal has a current clean slate campaign. Who benefits from clean slate? I think that most of these will be pretty obvious to everybody on this call, but I do like to just call them out. When you're talking to people about clean slate, I think it's really important to note that this is something that everybody is going to benefit from. First and foremost, people with a criminal record that would be impacted by the legislation will benefit, and their families, because it is removing that record barrier to employment, to stable housing, to education access, all of that stuff that people are frequently blocked from because of a record. The criminal legal system itself will benefit from not being so burdened with the petition-based process, with the many costs associated with that process, and the high workload in the courts that can result from expungement petitions. States will save taxpayer dollars because we'll see reduced incarceration. When you improve the reentry process, when you improve people's ability to be fully reconnected in society, you are going to reduce the number of people that end up back in prison. That's just a very common sense argument for clean slate. The economy is going to benefit because qualified job seekers are able to re-enter the labor force rather than staying in lower paying jobs than the ones that they would potentially be qualified for just because of that record. And last but certainly not least, our communities will be safer due to lower recidivism rates as more folks are able to move forward with their lives and provide for their families. And we'll dig in some of the future slides on some statistics that back up some of these different claims. So the first question that a lot of people have is, this sounds expensive. How much is this going to cost? And while we don't have, an exact figure for that, currently we can look to states that have implemented similar legislation. We know that they've spent between $3 and $15 million per state kickstarting the program, but you got to remember, we've got states from Oklahoma to California that have implemented Clean Slate. So the size of the state certainly has a lot to do with that cost. And most of the costs are upfront. So there's not a lot of minimal recurring cost. It's not like there's a cost per record expunged. It's really a cost to modernize, update, and automate the system. And those are costs that there's a benefit across the system, right? There's modernizing court records, making court records accessible. Those are things that everybody is going to benefit from, not just people pursuing or people that qualify for expungements. As expungements increase across the state, we could expect to see that those costs would be covered by the additional revenue generated by increased economic activity. So as people rejoin the workforce, have extra spending money, that extra spending money is going back into Missouri's economy. So we expect that any of those upfront Clean Slate costs would come back to the state in the coming years because of the benefits from passing Clean Slate. So this next part, again, just a caveat that if you've attended many Clean Slate presentations or town halls in the past, some of this information might already be familiar to you. So bear with me if so. But the consequences of a criminal record, we know, go far beyond the sentence. When someone walks out of prison, when someone completes their final day on probation or parole, that is not the end of their punishment. It is supposed to be. That is, what the legal limit of that punishment is. But we know the reality in our country is that people fall into this type of perpetual punishment where a record keeps them from being able to access safe and secure housing options, from being able to move up in their chosen field or make a transition into a different type of field. It undermines family stability because everybody that's impacted by a record, they're not just islands, right? People have kids, people have other people in their households that are depending on them and on their income. Difficulty accessing education or other types of training opportunities that can block somebody's advancement. And I think that maybe the single most important thing is not actually on this slide, and that's the mental and emotional burden that I think you heard everybody in that first video talk about a little bit, but that emotional burden that hangs over people because they know that society looks at them differently with a record. Because that when you are applying for a job and that background check gets run, there's going to be more follow-up questions. That type of mental anxiety is one of, I think, the most harmful, unseen cost of a criminal record. Our current expungement process is costly, it is time-consuming, and it is confusing. And that's the biggest reason why we need Clean Slate in Missouri. About 500,000 people in our state have criminal convictions that are eligible for expungement. They're currently eligible. So they meet the, it's an offense that is eligible, and then they've also met that waiting period criteria as well. The waiting period is a little bit different depending on what the offense is. The average expungement in Missouri cost $500. Not an amount that many people can afford that need it most. You also have to go back to the county of origin to pursue your case. Unless you have pro bono help, you need an attorney and you need to pay for an attorney, obviously. So this is really just kind of where the costs start out. They're often much larger than this for many people if you were to factor in travel costs, time off of work, and all of that stuff. And that's why a lot of people cannot access it. So we know that less than 1% of that 518. Oh, great question, Pastor Jackson. I have some links on the last slide here. That number and this less than 1% number came from a big report that was done by the paper Prisons Initiative, which is a academic research-based group that does a lot of kind of statistical research into criminal legal systems in different states. And I've got a link to their report on one of the last pages here. So I'll make sure that you guys all have that. So less than 1% of those eligible have actually been able to obtain an expungement. We have had our current expungement law now for about a decade. So a decade in, we have a less than 1% success rate. If I had any program that I had been running for 10 years and I had a less than 1% success rate for people applying to be in that program, I would say it's probably time to go back to the drawing board and figure out a different system, because this one is clearly not working. People are not able to access these expungements that they deserve and that they're currently eligible for. So if the current uptake rates continue, it would take 1,000 years to clear the backlog of expungement eligible records, just kind of putting it into another numeric way to think about this. So it has been so slow to just do that 1% of people that qualify for record sealing. If that current rate were to continue, it would take 1,000 years to clear the backlog. So just looking at some other statistics about the many consequences of having a criminal record. We know that applicants with a record are only half as likely as other job seekers to get a call back from a potential employer. There's nearly 50,000 state and federal regulatory restrictions that limit individuals with records from accessing employment, from accessing occupational licensing, housing, public benefits, voting, education, lots of other opportunities, things like being able to volunteer and be on your kid's field trip, being able to serve on a jury of your peers. Just a couple examples in our state that people can be blocked from because of a criminal record. We know that background checks are used by 2 and 3 colleges, nearly 9 and 10 employers, and 8 and 10 landlords, and that this really limits opportunities for people. $2.6 billion is the annual earnings loss that's associated with convictions in Missouri that already qualify for record sealing relief. So because those people still have records, even though they qualify for expungements, we are losing $2.6 billion annually in Missouri because those folks are not able to participate in the economy at the level that they would be able to if they didn't have that criminal record looming over them. Shutting people out, similarly, this is kind of looking at our national numbers annually. Shutting people out from the labor market due to arrest and conviction records cost our country's economy an estimated $78 to $87 billion per year in lost gross domestic product. So this is, you know, if you're talking to somebody and they are not making the connection that this is something that they should care about because, you know, maybe they don't have a criminal record or maybe they're a very tough on crime, you know, kind of attitude. These are the types of things to bring to their attention. This is what we mean when we say everybody suffers from these issues. The whole economy is held back because people are kept out due to a record. Nearly half of children in the US have at least one parent with a criminal record. So this is something that impacts kids. This is a quote from Fran that you heard from in the first video. What is the impact of Clean Slate? So what type of a difference could automated record sealing make when we're looking at this problem? So Clean Slate legislation would provide fairness, safety, and second chances. We know that 1 year after a record's been cleared, people are 11% more likely to be employed. And the wages of people that have received an expungement increase by more than 20% just within that first year. So it does not take very long to start seeing the benefits of record sealing. 5 years after an expungement, individuals were less likely than members of the general public to be convicted of a crime. I think, this is a really great statistic to kind of keep in your back pocket if you are frequently engaging with conversations with people that might not think that they know a lot of people with a criminal record. Although I think that that's something that many people might be in the dark about, just how many people are in fact impacted by a criminal record. But this is really what we mean when we talk about how Clean Slate makes our community safer. When people are incentivized to be able to rejoin the labor force in the way that they want to do so, when they are able to go after the housing that they want to access without being blocked, that makes everybody safer. It makes it less likely that that person will have any kind of reoffense or return to a period of incarceration. And people take that freedom and they take those rights very seriously, especially when they've been lost. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see that people are even less likely than someone that did not have a previous record to be convicted of any future crime 5 years after an expungement. So I want to just take a quick break before we move on to messaging and address any questions folks might have up until this point of the presentation. Pastor Jackson, I see your second question, stating those numbers because the number is much higher. I'd encourage you to read through the report. I know that, they are just looking at people in Missouri with a record from Missouri, not necessarily, any type of criminal record if it came from another state. And they're looking at, they came up with those numbers by looking at all of the data they could find on the types of offenses that are eligible for record sealing, and then how many people have been convicted of those offenses in the state. Any other questions that anybody has at this point? All right. Oh, was that a question? I heard somebody come off mute. All right, so next I want to get into some of the key messaging. So this is, like I said, kind of the meat and potatoes of how we talk about Clean Slate. There's a lot that can be said about Clean Slate, but I think, for a campaign like this, keeping it simple when it's the first time that you are talking to somebody about the subject, and really just sticking to some of this very top line messaging, not really like getting too deep in the weeds because this can be a confusing topic. I see Yolanda's question. What is the initial cost for clients? So under Clean Slate, there would be no cost. There would not be this petition-based process where you have to be aware that you qualify for an expungement. You have to file the correct paperwork. You have to get an attorney. You have to, there's a filing fee. There's, you have to travel to the court where that offense originated and see it through. It can take 6 months to a year for all of that to go through. So in comparison, Clean Slate, the burden would be on the state to automate the process. So when someone's eligibility time period comes up, it would happen automatically. They would not have to take any action in order for their record to be sealed. So no cost for the client. Good question. So it's really important to tailor your message to your audience. So if you're talking to business owners, you might select certain types of arguments. If you're talking to low-wage workers and labor organizers, you might highlight a different argument. Knowing the political background of the people that you're talking to, knowing the values that they hold most dear, that's a really good thing to know when you're going in to these conversations. And so kind of picking your messaging based on that, and kind of thinking through, okay, what are, the top 2 or 3 points that group's going to be the most interested in. So I'm just going to run through some of the messaging that we've found to be the most effective in the first year and a half of our state's campaign. Clean Slate is about fairness. I think that this is one of the biggest things that you can kind of really point to. We are not trying to radically expand the record sealing process here in Missouri. We want the people that currently qualify for record sealing to be able to access it. So we know that the current process is expensive, it's difficult to navigate. It's shuts people out with low incomes that already qualify for that second chance. We know that there's many, many different aspects of the criminal legal system that treat people with money or power very, very differently than those without. And this is just another example of a place where that happens. People that have the means to get their record sealed are able to do so. The people that do not have those means, even though they are legally entitled to that record sealing, are not able to access it. So by automating the process, by putting that back on the state, it will even the playing field for everybody and make sure that everybody is treated fairly to the record sealing relief that they qualify for. Clean slate is about second chances. Oh, great question from Nabira in the chat. Is the current Missouri clean slate with weed expungement automated or not? I've had a number of clients ask. So Amendment 3, I know that they have had some, I don't want to say hiccups because I think it's to be expected when you've got a big law change like the legalization of weed. My understanding, excuse me, is that marijuana expungement, they are trying to make that automated and that eventually it will be automated. But that within this first year, it is something that people are filing petitions for. However, there are not costs associated with those petitions because of Amendment 3 and because of the language included there. So Nabira, if that's something you'd like more information on, there's somebody I can put you in contact with that's a lot more familiar with all of the Amendment 3 details than I am, and is one of the campaign folks with Normal, and has helped some people with seeking expungements after the passage of Amendment 3. So just shoot me a private message and I will share that email with you if that would be helpful. So clean slate is about second chances. We believe that a person's whole life should not be defined by their worst mistake. And those who have completed their sentence and stayed out of trouble with the law deserve a second chance. Individuals that have paid their debt to society should not be punished forever by being denied jobs, housing, and the opportunity to take care of their families. Clean slate legislation creates effective members of the community and promotes hard work ethic. I think that this argument is a very kind of neutral argument that a lot of people would resonate with. You're not really saying anything, super left field or controversial here. You're just saying, hey, I don't think that people should be defined by their worst mistake for the rest of their lives. We know that records hold people back. Clean slate is a way to give people a true second chance. Clean slate is about safety. We know that studies show that people with a prior conviction who don't commit another crime within 4 to 7 years are no more likely to commit a future crime than anyone else in the general population. Clean slate makes local communities safer by giving people an opportunity to get back on their feet, turn their lives around, and support themselves and their families. So by really focusing on the fact that when people have more opportunities, they are not backed into corners where they feel like committing crime is the only path forward to be able to provide for their family, or that's something that they're doing from a place of mental anguish, or really struggling with the reentry process, and having multiple doors closed in their faces. All of those things can lead people to be re-engaged with the criminal legal system. And so by offering people a path forward with clean slate, you're making community safer for everybody. Clean slate will help Missouri families. As I said before, half of American children have at least one parent with a record. We know that the long-term consequences of a parent's record can really significantly impact a kid's mental development, their education, their future employment opportunities, overall well-being, their future likelihood of incarceration. If you haven't done any kind of reading into the impact on kids from a parental record or parental incarceration, I would really encourage you to do some reading, because there's some really, really big links there that just can't be understated. So by removing those parental barriers to employment, to housing, and to education, we can help give all children the chance that they deserve. This is actually just making me think. There's a couple links that I want to share with you guys while I am thinking about it. And they're from Empower Missouri. Every week does a weekly perspective looking at different policy issues, different anti-poverty policy issues in our state. And we have had a number of ones about Clean Slate. So I'm just going to put those in the chat. This first one that I'm sharing is a focus on Clean Slate and housing, and how this is going to impact access to safe housing. And just give me 1 second to find these other ones. My apologies. I should have pulled these together beforehand. And then this is the one that I had in mind. I wrote this piece, and there's a little bit of research here on the impact on kids, if you'd like to do any further reading on that. Clean Slate is good for Missouri's economy. I think the economic argument is always going to be a really powerful one. We know that in Colorado, they were able to pass Clean Slate by really branding it as an economic issue, not even really as a criminal legal reform issue, but almost purely as an economic issue. They had a governor that had kind of said, I don't want to pass anything related to criminal legal reform. And they were able to get Clean Slate passed across his desk by really branding it as a pro-economic advancement kind of issue. I would caution against this text that's in here. Missouri's economy is in trouble. I think in general we want to message things positively. So even if that's maybe the case, I wouldn't say it quite like that. But we do know it's definitely true that local businesses are having a hard time. Everybody, okay, I think if everybody could keep themselves on mute, that would be great. Awesome, thank you. So we know that businesses across our state are having a hard time filling positions, but there are tens of thousands of qualified applicants that can't take those jobs because of records. Some of these records are decades old. Clean Slate's going to help these individuals build a better life while strengthening local businesses and boosting our local economy. I just want to also put a shout out here. If you know anybody that is a business owner in our state, and you think that they would be interested in learning about Clean Slate, I would really encourage you to talk to them about it, send them some links, and encourage them to get involved in the campaign. Legislators listen to business owners. They listen to the rest of us, but they really want to hear from the business owners. So these are people that, even if it's a small local business that employs 10 people, that is somebody that has a voice in the Capitol, that legislators definitely want to hear from. So if they are interested in offering testimony, in being involved in kind of the Clean Slate business campaign planning that has gone on, I encourage you to make those connections. And anybody that that might be interested in being more connected with the Clean Slate campaign, always, you can always put them in contact with me. And I will actually drop my email in the chat just in case you don't have it. Oops. Here's just some numbers that can kind of back up that messaging around expected increase in wages after expungement. You can see that based on the average wage increase for individuals, Clean Slate could increase Missourian wages by an estimated $2.3 billion annually. And you also can see here that the increases are higher for Black Missourians than they are for white Missourians, and for women than they are for men. And that is because of the disproportionate racial and gender disparities that exist in our workforce. Black workers and women are more likely to be blocked out of those jobs. And so the impact of clean slate clean slate would go even further for those individuals. So any questions about messaging, about how to talk about clean slate, about any of those messages?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Phyllis Rowe. My question is, how does a person that has a criminal record learn about the qualifications for the closing of their records?
So to see if they currently qualify for an expungement?
Right.
Okay, great question. There is a resource that I linked to on the last page that has some kind of expungement clinic resources around the state. I think reaching out to one of the places that has attorneys that do some pro bono work is a good place to start if they want to see if they qualify or not. If they have a question about like a specific charge, the statutes can be really, really difficult to interpret, so it's hard to know if you even qualify. We have done a little bit of our own kind of sorting and organizing to try to fully determine, you know, what is included, what is not included. So if that's the kind of thing somebody is having any trouble with, you can always feel free to shoot them in my direction, and I will try to at least help and see if it's a record that is eligible. But in terms of, you know, actually starting that process, there are some clinics that offer pro bono assistance. And yeah, unfortunately, it is there is a much higher need than there is help for folks in our state right now with record sealing.
I understand. Okay, but I got your email address, and
Yes.
maybe we can start there if nowhere else. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I see that you shot me yours as well. So I'll shoot you an email with that info. Thanks.
Thank you. Mhm.
So one of the second to last things I guess that I want to cover here is just looking at our proposed policy here in Missouri for clean slate. I'm going to be talking about details from our 2023 legislation. It might look a little bit different, the legislation that gets filed in the next session, but this is where we're starting from. So what's the definition of expungement? As I mentioned, in Missouri, we do record sealing. So it means that the record's closed from public view, but it does still exist. It's still accessible by law enforcement if there's a future offense. The process, so in the proposal, the state would be responsible for processing, for notification, and for updating records monthly. Specifically, the Office of State's Courts Administrators, or OSCA, is kind of the department within the state that would be responsible for automating the expungement process. Eligibility, so anyone that's currently eligible under Missouri law and has met that waiting period. Most people that qualify are eligible between 1 to 5 years of completing their sentence. And just something to note here, completion of your sentence is your last day on supervision. So if somebody gets out of prison, that's not necessarily the end of their sentence. If they still have time on parole, their final day of supervision would be their final day of their sentence. Reporting requirements. So this is written into the policy to ensure that there is some follow through and that we can see what is happening going forward, make sure that the state is doing their part in all of this. So starting 3 years after the passage of the bill, annual reports to the judiciary committees in both chambers would be required to ensure compliance and effectiveness those reports would need to be aggregated by race, by gender, by offense type, so we can ensure that everybody is accessing records at the same, accessing expungements at the same rate. Fees, so court fees and fines do not need to be paid in advance of expungement. Again, this is what we're proposing in our policy. This is not the current case. They still would need to be paid, but not necessarily as a prerequisite. Unpaid restitution would still need to be paid in full. So restitution is, an economic piece that is tied to a specific conviction. So that would need to be paid, but just other types of court fees. Currently, they do have to be paid for someone to be able to access their expungement. If someone, has this record hanging over them and they're not able to, get a well-paid job, it is likely that those court fees and fines can be outside of the realm of what they are able to afford to pay off. And so requiring that they be paid so someone can access that expungement is just another example of kind of the dual nature of our system. And so that's why we are really trying to stick to our guns on this piece, and hopefully we'll be able to get this included in whatever final version of the policy ends up passed. Lifetime limits. Currently it's 1 felony and 2 misdemeanors. I want to call out, so Senate Bill 189 was a big omnibus bill that was passed by the legislature at the end of May. It is on the governor's desk right now. He has until mid-July to either sign it or not sign it. Either way, it will become law. If he vetoes it, then it would have to go back to both chambers for another vote. And Senate Bill 189, amongst many other provisions, does include several changes to the petition-based process, including an increase of lifetime limits from 1 felony to 2 felonies and from 2 misdemeanors to 3 misdemeanors. We would like to see this increase even further to 3 felonies and 5 misdemeanors. Senate Bill 189 is also waiving the $250 filing fee, but we know that there's still many other costs associated with expungement. So either, all of these changes, while good changes for the petition-based process, we don't expect to really see that drastically increase the number of people that are able to access expungements in our state. And so we still believe that clean slate and that automation is the most impactful way forward to ensure that people are actually able to get their records sealed. Lifetime limits, yes, exactly, the amount of counts that could be cleared. So the way that this works, so say that somebody was arrested and they were charged with 2 different felonies at the time of the arrest, both associated with the same crime. In both, for the sake of this example, both types of charges that are eligible for expungement. So currently those would be run as a single felony. If they happen in the same instance, they just count it for whatever the highest felony is. But say you're like a lot of people and you have a criminal record that spans a couple years. And so you have, multiple felonies from multiple times, even if they're all eligible, only one currently. And if 189 is passed by the governor, then 2 felonies from 2 different times would be eligible. And then implementation, if a clean slate policy is passed, the state would have 2 years to put the proposed changes into effect. And with implementation, I think we're in a good spot because 10 states have already passed clean slate laws. So we have 10 states to learn from. There is also, some national groups that have offered assistance to our state if we are to pass clean slate. One of them being Code for America. They do a lot of kind of data science and analysis work, and they would be able to help Missouri in this process. Mary asked if Representative Krista Finelli and Senator Trent are expected to refile their clean slate bills. yes, at this point, we are expecting both of our sponsors from last year to refile, but we are also trying to bring some new folks into the mix as well, including Representative Hicks, who had an alternative automated expungement bill that was pretty different from ours, actually, in some key ways, but we have been in talks with him and we'll continue to talk with him in the next couple months ahead of session, and hope that he will be a co-sponsor with Krista Finelli. Great questions. And then if anybody would like this presentation, so I will include it in the follow-up email that goes out, along with this recording, and a link to this presentation. Right now, I think in the early chat, which if you joined a little bit later, you might not have anymore. So let me repaste it real quick. But here is a link to the presentation in the Google Drive, and everybody should have access to it. I think I made it for open access. So feel free to download and share from there if you would like to. Okay, and last but not least, in our last 8 minutes, I want to look at some campaign planning and ways to be connected with the campaign. Again, I know a lot of people on this call are already partner organizations and already connected with the campaign in a lot of ways. But if not, this is where you can sign up to be a partner organization right here on our website. You scroll to the bottom and you can sign up there. Partners, the expectations for organizational partners are that you will participate in a monthly partner meeting. These have kind of been on hold. They're going to be getting kicked back off in July. I wanted to do these advocate orientations before kind of starting to get back into these monthly meetings after session. You'll be listed on the website. We'll ask you to participate in various social media campaigns. We would ask you to share campaign events, volunteer opportunities, any other kind of opportunities for the campaign with your networks. We'll routinely ask for letters of support about why your organization supports Clean Slate, for op-eds, if that's something that makes sense for you to do, and or letters to the editor. And last but not least, that you submit testimony in support of Clean Slate legislation when it is time to do so. One of the most helpful ways that you can help with the Clean Slate campaign is engaging with your networks on it. So you can include information about Clean Slate in your org's newsletter or any other kind of mailings that you might have going out. You can direct people to sign the Clean Slate support letter. I'm going to follow this link real quick because if you point people to any one spot on the website, I would ask that it be here. This is and I'm actually going to put it in the chat and just ask that if you have not signed on to the support letter yet, that you just take a second to do so. Once we get to kind of a critical number on this, I think we're shooting to get to about 1,000. I think we're around like maybe 600 signatures now. But once we get to about 1,000 signatures, we will share this letter with legislators and say, hey, look at how many people in the state believe that it's time for Clean Slate in Missouri. So we'd love to go into next session with more signatures there. You can host a Clean Slate presentation for your org, for a community group, for a place of worship. If that's something that you'd like to connect with me on, if you'd like to get myself or somebody else from the campaign to speak, please just reach out. You can write a letter of support to share with the campaign. We put those letters of support on the website. If you're interested in writing an op-ed, you can connect with me to coordinate that. Social media and other promo materials. There's this resource section on our website where you can find social media toolkits. You can find fact sheets that you can print out. These videos are a good resource. These are from all of our previous town halls. Which I do not think that we're going to do this same virtual town hall series this year. We're just going to focus on in-person events. So this is a really great resource. They were good events and good conversation happened at all of them. So that's a good place to engage with people if you're trying to get them up to speed on stuff. Social media toolkits. You can check out. They're in the drive. Some of them are a little bit outdated, but they will be being updated soon. I think we're just going to do them like every couple months instead of having them every single month. But here in these toolkits, you can find information that you can just literally, copy and paste directly out of here. Some of the same graphics that you see in this presentation, you can copy and paste those directly in any of your materials. There's also a spot for Clean Slate stories on the website. So people that have a record that are speaking to the personal impact of Clean Slate, how it would impact them. There's a number of news articles and op-eds that are linked on the website. And then if you have any kind of communications or graphic support needs, as you're sharing about Clean Slate, you can reach out to Amber, is our communications director here at Empower Missouri. So if you'd like to, say you are advertising an event that the Clean Slate campaign is putting on, but you want to have your organization's graphic on the material that you're sending out, you can shoot that over to Amber and she can help you update any kind of graphics. Last but not least, during session, obviously we would like anybody connected with the campaign to submit testimony. We will be keeping you up to date about potential hearings and any other legislative updates. I'd encourage you to prepare your testimony ahead of time, towards the beginning of session. If you want to put your thoughts together, then you'll be prepared for whenever a hearing might be scheduled. This link will take you to Empower Missouri's testimony, which also I would just encourage you to read. It covers a lot of different points. House committees allow testimony to be submitted online. So even if you can't make it in person, you can still submit your testimony for the House, but that's not an option in the Senate, unfortunately. We are going to do another Clean Slate Advocacy Day, as we did last year in March. This year, we're going to try to do it a little bit earlier in session, likely in late February. And as soon as we have a date picked for that, if you're on our email list, you will get a notification about when that date is going to be. And then, as I mentioned, here's just a couple additional resources that I want to point you to. This first is from the Missouri Budget Project. It's an economic impact analysis of Clean Slate in Missouri. So this is where I got those numbers about the expected increase in wages and the amount that Clean Slate could generate for Missouri's economy. They also have a little bit of information about kind of the cost, which again, we don't have, a specific number for yet, but we can make some kind of educated guesses about what that impact would be. This is the one pager that I mentioned with expungement resources. So if you were doing, any kind of tabling, if you've got information about Clean Slate somewhere at a resource fair, I would encourage you to print out a couple of these to have as well, because people will undoubtedly ask questions about current expungement resources. And then last but not least, this is that paper prisons report to the Missouri Second Chance Expungement Gap. And this is where that 518K number came from. You can see that the actual number of people with criminal records is closer to 2 million. It's 1.8 million. And then number of population with convictions, the share of people eligible for relief is about half of that. And the number of people, that 518K, I think I said this earlier, but I just good to call out, we were talking about convictions eligible for relief. So more people than 518,000 would actually qualify for some type of Clean Slate relief because of non-convictions. But it's just the convictions eligible for relief that make up that 500,000 number. So encourage you to do some reading through there. It's a pretty interesting report. And really outlines the big issue with the gap here between who is eligible and who's actually been able to access it. All right, and with that, I'm going to stop recording, but I will stay on for a couple minutes.